Dr. Monotov.
Donnie.
I know this is gonna sound kind of weird, but do you know anything about time travel?
A wormhole with an Einstein-Rosen bridge, which is theoretically a wormhole in space controlled by man. So, according to Hawking, a wormhole may be able to provide a shortcut for jumping between two distant regions of space-time.
So in order to travel back in time, you have to have a big spaceship or something that can travel faster than the speed of light.
Theoretically.
And be able to find one of these wormholes.
The basic principles of time travel are there. You've got your vessel and your portal, and your vessel can be just about anything, most likely a spacecraft.
Like a DeLorean.
Metalcraft of any kind.
You know, I love that movie, the way they shot it. It's so, like futuristic, you know?
Listen, don't tell anybody that I gave you this. The woman who wrote this used to teach here. She was a nun many years before that, but then overnight she just, she became this entirely different person. She up and left the church, wrote this book. She started teaching science right here at NSX.
Same time travel. Roberta Sparrow?
That's right.
Roberta Sparrow.
A modern day remake of Matthew Vaughn's Layer Kicker, Coen Brothers stand up with Timothy Chalamet. A Citizen Kane prequel, a Midnight Cowboy sequel, Alvin and the Chipmunks deserving of the squeakquel. There's so many new ways to revisit sideways, but a graphic novel is how we choose to update. But we still hold fast, you can't change the past on the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
When someone says the D, it could mean one of two things. Either they're crudely referring to a male body part, or they're talking about Michigan's most populous city, Detroit. This Midwest mecca is made famous by the American auto industry, Motown music, and a little road called 8 Mile, which is considered by many to be a cultural boundary separating a region of Detroit that is predominantly African American from the largely white population to its north. The road became more widely known due to the 2002 film bearing its name, featuring Marshall Mathers as an up-and-coming rapper and the people in his social circle. The film also features stand-up performances from actors Brittany Murphy, Kim Basinger, Anthony Mackie, Mekhi Phifer, and lesser-known actor Evan Jones as Cheddar Bob. But Evan Jones wasn't the only actor vying for the role of the butter-fingered gunslinger. In fact, two other actors starring in a television show together, also set in the Detroit area, were up for the role. Freaks and Geeks burnout buddies Jason Segel and Seth Rogen. Rogen tells the story of their auditions in his autobiography yearbook about he and Segel couldn't stop laughing during their auditions. But even if Rogen had landed the role of Cheddar Bob, this would not have been his first movie role. Then 20-year-old Rogen would appear in a 2001 film that sent a shockwave through the film world, puzzling and enchanting audiences for years to come. Greetings, Starfighters. This is Ruined Childhoods, and on this episode, we celebrate Richard Kelly's heady hit Donnie Darko, or as the kids call it, the Double D. They don't really. Dan, what is your take on time and interdimensional travel?
It's not something I do every day, but something that like to take up a couple of times a year.
Totally.
And yeah, every now and again I like to just get myself into a loop, and it's helpful. It's good. It's great to always go back and maybe do things over. Maybe not. It's good to figure out what in your life you have control over. It's I know it's controversial. I know it's big. Some people say leave it to the states. I don't know. I think it should be legal for all.
I could not agree more, and I appreciate your taking the time to share your thoughts. I realize it's a sensitive subject.
Well, that's what we're here to do, John. If we don't talk about some sensitive subjects, what would we talk about?
I guess movies.
Yeah, movies, I guess, but those are sensitive subjects for us, aren't they?
Yeah. Donnie Darko.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we're having this opportunity to talk about this movie. I don't know if we would have chosen this one if we weren't like going through like a theme and it kind of like fits what we're going for, and it's just like, yeah, why not? Let's do it.
I mean, I think we would have gotten here sooner or later, but this was a wonderful opportunity for it.
Yeah.
Great opportunity to talk about a movie that I've, not, again, much like my interdimensional time travel, not a movie I go back to, like yearly, but every couple of years, go back to it and try to, put some more pieces together.
Yeah, it's one that definitely benefits from doing like extra reading. And the director's cut also helps you unlock a lot of what's actually going on. But Dan, do you remember your first time seeing Donnie Darko?
I do. The question is, do you remember my first time seeing Donnie Darko?
I remember my first time seeing Donnie Darko. I feel like, if I'm doing my mental math correctly, I probably would have gotten it on DVD when it first came out. Did you watch it with me?
I did.
Was it on DVD?
It was on DVD.
Okay.
We had gone up to Boston.
Okay.
And it was already very late at night.
Okay.
Add to that other inhalable things that were consumed, and
sure.
I remember watching it. And it was one of those experiences, and like, it's funny because I even kind of remember like the room in which we watched it.
Okay.
And I remembered that I think at one point I kind of dozed off and then woke up again. And it was similar to...
And a jet engine had fallen through the ceiling.
Yeah. It was like, where did that come from? Nobody knows. But it was one of those situations where it was very intriguing to me. And it was a movie that, even though the first time I saw it, I was like, wait a second, what just happened?
Yeah.
But it wasn't one where it was, oh, that was ridiculous, forget that. Like, it was one of those that like I wanted to figure out.
Yeah.
I said, I will watch this movie again.
Right. It definitely came along at a time where there were movies that like could toe a line, where it's like, if it was done slightly differently, it would have been, I don't know, a messier, schlockier movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And despite the fact that like when this movie came out, I was crazy about it, I always recognized some of the things that kind of bumped me about it, that never sat well with me. And then watching it again in the past few weeks, those things came back, and I was like, yeah, it's like line readings and things like that, where it's just like, or certain elements, there are certain times where they like over 80s-ify it, where it's like, oh, does he have to be like messing with a Rubik's Cube while laying in bed? Or can't he just be like laying in bed? Like, there's too much, I think, of the like, we get it, it's 1988.
A little bit. Yeah, I would say a little bit. I think for me, it's the type of thing where it's, and watching it again recently, this really stood out, especially because I did do a little research and reading as to like, okay, all right, I just need a little something to guide me here. And watching it again, I saw that, okay, there are a few things that you just, for this whole thing to work. And you're right, like it really toes a line where if anything was out of balance, it wouldn't work. And I think that like these little, flaws and things that you just kind of have to like look past would stand out a lot more. Maybe there are certain things about the story, about the plot, and the questions about like, yeah, but if that's happening, then what about that? Where you just, there's not so many, and they're not so glaring that you can't just say, oh, okay, all right, I'm going to look at the big picture here and focus on that. And I think doing that, it's a pretty cool movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can watch it a couple of different ways. You can watch it trying to like decode what's going on, or you can watch it and just kind of giggle at the things like sparkle motion and enjoy living in the confusion and kind of handing your trust over to the film and being like, well, whatever's going on here, they have it figured out. But I know that I'm having a good time without needing to figure it out.
Right.
Yeah?
Yeah, there's enough going on that you can connect to. There's enough of that, like, kind of standard coming of age, teenager, high school movie. There's enough of that in there that you can connect with. And there are, and you know, we can, should we go into the synopsis yet? Or
go for it, Dan.
Let's
go for it.
So here we go. Before we start getting into some of the finer plot points, here we go. So, Donnie, a teenage boy with psychological issues, avoids death by a fallen airplane engine when an imaginary 6-foot rabbit lures him from his home and informs him of an impending apocalypse. With the jet engine's origin unknown, Donnie and his family grapple with a tragedy that could have gone way worse, but Donnie has bigger fish to fry. Frank, the imaginary bunny, makes him commit large-scale crimes, such as flooding his school or burning down the house of local celebrity Jim Cunningham, a wealthy self-help author who is harboring a dark secret. But in his waking life, Donnie questions Frank's suggestions of time travel, leading him to a book written by Roberta Sparrow, a centenarian recluse townie who compulsively checks her mailbox. Sparrow's book, Philosophy of Time Travel, perfectly lays out Donnie's experience and leads him to the pathway to preventing the end of the world. In the cast, we have Jake Gyllenhaal in his, I would call this his breakout role.
Yeah, definitely.
Donnie Darko, and I would say also in a breakout role, Maggie Gyllenhaal playing his big sister Elizabeth. She's taking a gap year and she's applied to Harvard.
Oh, yeah.
We've got Davy Chase. Davy Chase plays their kid sister Samantha, who is the lead dancer in her school's dance squad, Sparkle Motion. Mm-hmm. And it seems like they go to I don't know if it's like a K through 12.
I think so.
Or, yeah. They all, well, I mean, not Elizabeth, but Donnie and Samantha are both in the same school.
It's a private school, and they clearly live in like an affluent community.
Middlesex, it very generically named, so this could be like
hoity-toity kind of, yeah.
But yeah, they're definitely, they're doing well. We've got as their parents, as the Darkos, Holmes Osborne and Mary McDonnell. We've got James Duvall as Frank the Bunny. As Donnie's English teacher, who recognizes his potential as an intellectual, we've got Drew Barrymore, who I believe was kind of the key to this movie getting made.
She was an executive producer on it, I believe, but yeah, she was pivotal in its happening.
Right. And she at this point was going, like, her career was in a big resurgence after, Never Been Kissed and Charlie's Angels. So, also, big at the time, Noah Wiley is, Donnie's science teacher who explains or helps explain time travel theory. He gives him Roberta Sparrow's book. As Jim Cunningham, the late, great Patrick Swayze, and as any of our regular listeners know, we are crazy for Swayze, so always nice to see Patrick Swayze. We have, as Jim Cunningham's biggest #1 fan, that the weird gym teacher, pain in the ass PTA mom, the only one to bridge, or the only one to transcend the parent-teacher bridge. Beth Grant as Kitty Farmer. Thank you. As Donnie's therapist, Catherine Ross.
I know, this is such a stacked cast, and you're not even done.
And like Catherine, like what had Catherine? I don't know what she had been doing, but
I don't know.
Like we
Since
know
The Graduate.
Well, The Graduate, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Right.
Like Catherine Ross, like late '60s, early '70s. Big star, and she pops up here as the therapist. It's great. And then we have Jenna Malone as Gretchen, who's Donnie's new to town girlfriend.
Right.
She's got some trauma of her own in her past, but, and so she and Donnie kind of connect. And as previously mentioned, we've got school bullies, Ricky and Seth, played by Seth Rogen in his first film role.
Yep.
And Phantom Planet's Alex Greenwald.
Sure, which can lead us into how I first saw this movie. If you'd like me to go there.
Please do.
So this movie came out right when I was in my freshman year of college. And at the time, I was really into the band Phantom Planet. And I was probably on their mailing list or whatever, and there was information about this movie that Alex Greenwald, the singer, was in. And between him and Jason Schwartzman, it was like, this was when their film careers were really starting to happen. I mean, clearly Rushmore had happened a few years earlier, but like...
Not too long before that.
Jason Schwartzman's film career was turning into something different right around this time. And I saw, Alex Greenwald is in a movie. Very cool. At the time, I was going to school in Connecticut, which was not too far from Boston. And so I saw that there was an advanced screening of this movie at some like cool theater in Boston. And so I went to it and became like insta obsessed with it. And,
wow.
Alex Greenwald, he's done a little bit of acting here and there. He was in a Gap commercial with Rashida Jones and, like a couple little things. But this was definitely, his biggest role, I would have to imagine. And it's kind of crazy that like he and Seth Rogen were both kind of this duo together. And it's like, who would have known that Seth Rogen would become such a megastar? And Phantom Planet is still around. They're still doing stuff. I watched, they did like some sort of live thing on TikTok recently. So it's like, they're still doing their thing. And I don't want to spoil anything, but I'm just going to go ahead and say, I've got a feeling that his name is going to come up on our next episode too. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. And he's not the only one.
He's not the only one. Well, we'll talk about that in the next episode.
Right.
But yeah,
right.
I was so drawn to this movie. And I even remember that this was one of the first movies that like, I remember having like a very unique kind of website. And I don't know if it still exists, but like it had this kind of cryptic vibe to it. And it in itself was kind of like a puzzle.
Okay.
And so it was a very creative website. And I kind of just saw that this movie was, kind of evolving the way that movies were presented and marketed. And the vibe of the movie itself also just like was something I was really drawn to. And so I don't know, I watching it now, all these years later, it doesn't really pack the same punch, but I still really appreciate it and look back at my time, like first seeing this film and watching it obsessively over and over again. Like I look at that time fondly. And I kind of vaguely remember us watching it together in like some dorm room somewhere or something.
Yeah. But that's so cool because it's also just like cool to be in on something that like this became a cult film.
Yeah.
Really more with home video, partially because its theatrical release was like right after 9/11.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So it was, I remember hearing about it. I remember hearing about it from a friend of mine that like, winter 2001. I remember hearing about it, and I remember hearing about it from you.
Yeah.
But for you to see it in this test screening and knowing about it really before most people outside of the industry would have known about it, and seeing it in a theater, like that test audience, I feel like there's that, sometimes there you get that like exciting vibe. And I feel like with a movie like this, like that would be That would be so cool.
Well,
and
it
it's
was
also
one of those.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. But I mean, it's also considering where you were, like you said, you were a freshman in college. Like, yes, this is the type of movie that when you're a freshman in college, like, yes, you get obsessed with. Yeah.
Yeah.
It
also,
is.
like, going to school for film.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Forget
and this
it.
is, it's Richard Kelly's first movie.
Yeah.
And so it's like, of course it's going to click for somebody like me at that time.
Right. And it's not taking anything away from it, but
right.
Like it really was that movie for you at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of something like comparable for me. I don't know, maybe seeing Pulp Fiction when I was a senior in high school and like going back to see it again and again.
Mm-hmm.
Going to there have been a few movies where like maybe I haven't seen the like previews like test screening of it, but have gone opening night or opening weekend to a movie that really takes on longer. Even The Big Lebowski was a movie that like it took a while for people to catch on to. So
oh yeah, absolutely, for sure. Yeah, Donnie Darko, it was just one where, for like The Big Lebowski, the Coens had been established. And this one, it was like nobody really saw coming. Jake Gyllenhaal wasn't the name that he is now.
No.
I mean, he was in City Slickers.
But no one was like, oh, the kid who plays Billy Crystal's son in like that 2 scenes in City Slickers and that. Oh, I'm in.
Yeah, and also it's just like he plays a kind of strange teen who wears hoodies and, he's smart, but it's not like in an in-your-face way. He's very intelligent.
You know what it is? He's very... And I'm not saying that like this type of high school kid didn't exist in 2001, but... I think Donnie Darko as a realistic portrayal of a teenager is much more common now.
Sure. Yeah.
So much more like between, and I think just because there's so much less stigmatization of therapy and mental health treatments and being on, taking medications. So. Yeah.
Well, that reminds me of one of the things that did bump me. And that's kind of always not really sat well with me about this movie. I mean, first of all of the stuff about like the therapy and the medication and everything, because I feel like the audience is kind of being led to believe that it has something to do with, that what's going on has something to do with his, his situation in therapy and the medication. And in the one of the first scenes when it's the whole Darko family eating dinner together, there's a really awkward like line reading where, well, first of all, like Maggie Gyllenhaal's character Elizabeth just starts off by saying like, I'm voting for Dukakis, which is another one of those like, okay, it's the 80s, I get it. And that does, just show kind of like the generational differences between the daughter and the parents and things like that who were Bush supporters. And then she says something to Donnie and he's just like, whoa, why so hostile, Elizabeth? Maybe you should be in therapy. And I never liked that line reading. It felt really weird to me and it still does.
Oh, yeah. It reminds me. Yeah, that line reading is really interesting. And it reminds me of the line in it reminds me of Parenthood. It reminds me of like Parenthood when Kevin, and
I'm the one in therapy.
Right. Yes. That line.
But that works. What doesn't work for me is it's the way that Donnie says Elizabeth, like it's one of those exposition scenes where it's just like everything that's happening is being made to just be like, okay, he's in therapy. His sister's name is Elizabeth. Check. We got it. She is liberal. Father is conservative. Check. Got it. So I don't know. That scene just kind of felt always very, clunky and utilitarian to me. And I don't know, the performances get a little caught up in that. But I do have to say Holmes Osborne is so great as the dad. He's also the dad in That Thing You Do. Mm-hmm. And he's such a great dad.
He's Holmes Osborne is one of those, he's a fantastic character actor. Mm-hmm. And yes, you usually see him, he's somebody's dad, or he's like military.
Right. Mm-hmm.
In that, like, but he's not like that. He's like, someone who's walking, he's in the triangle of people walking down the hallway in the Pentagon, but he's not leading it.
Right. No, absolutely.
And he's great. Love, so to counter a bad line reading with a wonderful line reading, and it just like, it's Holmes Osborne just kind of like nailing that character, that baby boomer dad who's still kind of he doesn't have this like Peter Pan syndrome, but he's definitely still like trying to hold on to that like youthfulness. Like he has this line after Donnie calls